Anime, man. There's a genre for everyone. You want to watch a sports anime? Well, no, he has a superpower crossover. It's there for you. You want to watch a battle shonen where everything goes exactly how you think. The main character is going to start off as a loser and work his way up and become the biggest and baddest in the world. They have so many of those. You want to watch a thrilling narrative where the detective somehow knows every little thing before it happens and you're left thinking, well, why didn't he just solve the issue earlier? Or if you're a lonely loser who just sits at home and watches anime all day while eating fast food, do you want to watch a romance story? They have so many of those for you. Okay, that was a joke. I'll watch a good bit of romance. Then we get to this genre that is relatively new, relatively unknown, and relatively cool. And it's called Isekai. Now, here's the issue with Isekai, right? Like I was saying with the other anime, they're all similar, right? They all have similar plot and similar themes, similar characters. Except the thing is with Isekai, in terms of them being similar, it's like really similar. And I mean similar to the point where if you see one, you've seen them all. Here's how it goes. Start story. Kid's a loser. Boom. All of a sudden, he dies or he buys this game. Boom, all of a sudden he's transported into another world. He knows how to play video games already, so he's ultimately overpowered. His appearance also changes, and he's all of a sudden the most badass looking guy of all time. Boom, every single woman in the series is gonna fall in love with him regardless of age, and I mean that in the bad way. It's also a grand world, which actually pretty unique world, but most of the worlds have the depth of a piece of paper, and all of these characters are super similar and super similar narratives. And this all started because of course Sword Art Online, which started with our boy Kirito, and that really kicked this all off in terms of going into a game world and everything like that. You want to know something really cool? The Sword Art Online game isn't even an MMO. I just need to throw that in there. Like, isn't that really crazy to me? Like, that's bizarre. That's bizarre. Why is whatever. Sword Art Online is okay. Some of them are bad. I got a cheat skill in another world and become unrivaled in the real world too. It's one of the worst shows I've ever watched in my entire life. And then we get to this new show. Arguably, in the eyes of everyone, the best Isekai. No. Some people claiming it the best anime outright, Mushoku Tensei. So before I got deep into the anime world and really only watched popular shonen, everyone would make jokes about this show called Mushoku Tensei, and I'm sitting there like, oh my god, this show's probably weird and has weird stuff in it. And then when I get into the anime world, they're like, yeah, it has weird stuff in it, but it's one of the best shows you'll ever watch. And I was like, okay, if it has weird stuff in it, I don't really want to watch it. And then one day I decided to pull the trigger, and honestly, it was pretty crazy to me. So I'm guessing if you're watching this, you don't want to hear me talk about the whole premise of the show, so I won't do the whole thing. I'm sure you want to hear what I have to say. So Mushoku Tensei starts off, same thing, big fat character dies. The difference is though, he's reborn as a child in a different world, but he keeps his memories and he still is the age of like a 35-year-old man, and he's literally a baby, and it keeps it at this point, which is really interesting. And as he's living with his family and learning everything about the world, it's not like he got reincarnated into the same world. There's magic, there's swords, there's elves, there's different creatures, and it seems really cool and vast. The way I would explain the world, and honestly I think the easiest way to describe this world is an open world RPG, The Witcher 3. It is literally like that, a deep fantasy world, and it's really cool. And he's born into this house, and he has a mother, a father, and they have a maid. Right away you're like, oh, this is one of those shows. Like, this is one of those shows. Oh, this is really one of those shows. But at the same time, it's an interesting premise. So you're like, okay, I'll keep watching. Then he gets introduced to this tutor, this mage that looks like she's like 12. And then you're like, okay, this is a 35-year-old man doing this, but hey, he's just a kid and he hasn't really done anything yet, so whatever. And you're like, it's actually really cool what he's being taught with the magic in the world. As soon as his tutor, Roxy, gets introduced, you see that Rudeus is all of a sudden, his past is not completely disregarded. A lot of the times in Isekai, go to another world, they basically just throw out that whole other shit. And it makes you sit there and think, why did we have to go to another world in the first place? Couldn't we just start off in a fantasy world? The trauma of his past and the fact that he was a fat loser, but not only that, you learn that he wasn't just a loser that's played video games and died. He was a loser that got bullied and harassed like crazy and became scared of the outside world and became a hermit. One of the best scenes that displayed this was when he was scared to go outside with Roxy because he got himself tied up naked at his high school. Now, obviously, the show is pretty R-rated, and if they're not scared to make those changes like that, that is actually pretty grueling and hard to deal with when you actually think about it in context of the story. This guy got exposed in front of his whole school butt-ass naked. Like, what the fuck? Like, that is crazy. That's actually good writing. And yeah, they're doing some weird shit, but you're like, oh, it's just him. It's not that bad. And then, nope. Nope, it is not just him. At one point, you're sitting there like, oh, is this really just like a slice of life type of thing? Like, he's sitting there alone with his family. He's not really doing much. There's not real conflict in the story. He's really just living life, and we're watching them live life, and it's not bad. But then you get introduced that, no, his father is actually from a line of royals, and his father doesn't really give a shit about it, but you realize that there's so much more to this world. You also realize there's a class system in terms of warriors, in terms of mage, in terms of swordsmen, and you're like, oh my god, wait, there's a whole political side to the show that I didn't know about, and I didn't know existed. And then his dynamic with this girl, Eris, is actually good, and of course, this Lane is also really cool. And then you realize there's a lot more to the beast. A lot of these shows just have elves, and then all of a sudden they move on and forget about everything, and you're like, oh my god, like, wait, there's so much to this story. There's so much to depth here. And then it's littered with like weird shit, of course. And then I have to talk about it. I know the weird shit jokes probably irritate a lot of you, but that one scene, you know what I'm talking about. That one scene, I was really heavily considered dropping the show, and I'm not like a super caring about a lot of this stuff, but like, what are you doing? Like, what point do you not think that, yeah, this is too far? So in terms of your tolerance for that stuff, there's gonna be a point in episode, I think it's around 7 or 8, where you're just gonna be like, yeah, I don't know about this. But anyways, moving on, you get to this big moment where out of nowhere you realize, okay, not only is Rudeus a super badass character, but this world is super dope too. But then you realize something. In context of the world, Rudeus isn't even that strong. Yes, he's above average and a genius, but then you see the mana blast happen, which in case you need a refresher, it teleported them all away. You realize that 1, Rudeus can meet characters that instantly kill him, and 2, their author is portraying this in a way to flex his world as well as create a grand change in the story. You see this often with character deaths when the author wants to really pivot the whole story and whole narrative. This was that action. And then when they're going on this adventure and you're seeing the world, you realize that this is a well-written story, and a lot of this is planned out because a lot of the characters, when they get scattered, they're of course all looking for each other, and they're all meeting people that have like mid-level connection with them. They might have met them at this point, but then this character's meeting them at this point. And when you see the interaction, and this is what Mushoku Tensei does really well, the characters that interact with Rudeus are also interacting with Roxy as well as interacting with Paul. You realize that this is well written in a way that everything is going to come together nicely, and when they do reunite, you're going to fully understand that. And that's what Mushoku Tensei does extremely well, balancing out all of these characters and their narratives and their story to make it feel cohesive. That's what really makes it great. And when you're doing this, when you're showing off all these different characters, you're also showing off different parts of the world. The world building in this show is on the level of One Piece. I don't think anyone would debate that. This world is so vast, and when you get scenes like Roxy reuniting with her family, and you realize that Roxy left in the first place because Roxy is from a clan that all has telepathy, she doesn't have it. So you realize her whole life, her entire life, she was never able to properly communicate with anyone. And of course, she's a demon as is, so she's already of a different race, and that's why she left. There's depth there. You realize that when you reunite with Paul, even though Rudeus has had it bad, Paul's whole continent got destroyed and dismembered, and he has nothing now. His family is in shambles, and Paul himself is in shambles. And even though he has Norn, Rudeus's little sister, he's living it really rough because he doesn't have anyone in his family. They're all scattered across the world. Rudeus's whole journey too, you realize that Rudeus is growing as a person too, and he has to understand that, yeah, I am a 35-year-old man, but it's been like 15 years at this point. I am connected to these people, and even though he doesn't consider them fully mother and father, at some point you have to be righteous. And then there's the whole part of the story with the man god is really interesting. Now the man god at times feels like plot device, but it's so good, and it's good pivots, and it's basically, so if you're wondering why Rudeus might do something a bit out of the ordinary that doesn't really make sense, he has man god there to tell him this is the right decision. They develop these relationships way better than some slice of life do, where the characters feel like they naturally should be friends at this point, where the characters honestly feel like real people. You actually care about Ruiijerd's, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that, Ruiijerd, the green hair demons. You actually care about him covering his reputation, and you realize the systems in the adventure guild, this world was made vast. And then you're at the end of the story and you're like, wait, his mother hasn't even been found yet. Wait, Sylphie is like out of the story. And then you realize like there is so much more for this story to give, and it's such a vast narrative. And as I'm watching this, I'm like, this has to be the peak of Isekai. This is absolutely the best the genre has to offer. And as I'm watching season 2, which I just started recently, even though it's been out for a while, it picks up right where it left off, and it actually has a unique animation style as well. It won't blow you away, but the way they do their openings and endings is of course super loved, and it's high effort, and it's part of the story, and it doesn't feel like something I should just skip out of obligation. It feels like something that was put there for a purpose, and the level of detail and care is all in all what makes this show incredible. And I really think you should give it a chance, and I'm sure a lot of you are watching this just because you want to rehash of it and relive it and hear what someone else's perspective is. And in terms of the weird stuff in the show, definitely be wary of it and definitely acknowledge it. And also, if you can get through it, give the show a chance because it's extremely well made and well oriented. If you want to watch a video on something that deserves a little bit more attention, check out this one on Bleach because I feel like more of you should be watching it. With that being said, don't forget, we're just getting started. We're going to stay consistent and I'll see you in the next video.